Hello and welcome to what we do. This is Around the Valley. This is our season preview for the 2026 fall season. And forgive me if I'm a little flushed because I want to start with an apology to everyone watching, coaches, administrators. We had conversations with many of you during the summer trying to arrange times to come and be on site and set up some deep dives, which we are looking to do. Unfortunately, with the way things were going for our summer, we were not able to do that. But as we continue to grow and as we continue to expand, you can bet your bottom dollar that we are going to be providing that level of coverage, that level of attention to these kids who deserve it. So again, on behalf of all of VST and personally for myself, because I made some promises that we'd be out, I'd like to apologize for not making it out. But we are going to be out and around all season, and we're going to make sure we see each and every one of our 21 teams. So we didn't get to most, I think almost all, maybe a couple we were able to get to during the summer. But as we kick this off with this preview, just know we will be seeing everybody. Now, that out of the way, joining me as always is Kenny Hodges. Kenny, how was your summer?
It was amazing, man. I'm excited. There's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of great things, a lot of great energy coming into this season, and I am excited for us to kick it all off. And that is what we're going to do here today. And when we talk about what's about to unfold into this fall season, right here in the San Fernando Valley with our 21 teams that are in our backyard. So, without further ado, let's get into the storylines. And let's talk about what has all had transpired as we get ready to kick off into this season. So let's go into some of the storylines real quick that have sort of unfolded as we head into 2026. Birmingham looking to retake the city. Still a great team, but as we saw last year, they beat Kennedy in the first round of Open. They lost a very close one to Crenshaw. They're looking to reclaim that spot, but they're going to have some work to do to retake that spot as Carson comes into the season as the number one team in the city. That's who they're chasing. So that we'll see what happens with Birmingham. Kennedy looking for another Valley Mission title. They have 3 straight undefeated seasons, but they've got some competition in the Valley Mission, and we'll kind of get into that as the season unfolds. The East Valley, a lot of movement, a lot of new faces in new places, but a lot of great things happening in that league. It should be a wide open East Valley title race. North Hollywood is defending champs, but they've had some turnover. They've had some things going on in their program, but they still got a senior quarterback who doesn't plan on relinquishing that crown. So we'll see what goes on with them. And like I said, 7 new head coaches in the San Fernando Valley, 5 of them in the East Valley League. So there's a lot of new things on the horizon as we head into week 0. So Arshavir, I'll ask you, of all the storylines, of all the things that we've seen happen during this offseason going into the fall, what's some of those things that intrigue you the most going into 2026?
Well, we always talk about like player turnover, right? Especially in this era where kids are able to transfer almost at will. And one of the beauties of living in the Valley for these students is transferring doesn't mean they have to move, right? So there's a lot less headache around going from Poly to Elko, right? Or from, Birmingham to Cleveland, or, Reseda all the way out to an East Valley school, say Verdugo, right? The travel isn't as bad. These are all 20, 30-minute commutes by car. The district, the LA Unified and CIF don't really breathe down your neck because you don't have to move. You don't have to, do any of that. So we've seen player movement a lot, over the last few years as it's become more or less restrictive, right? The transferring in athletics. But the turnover in coaching, we've seen it happens regularly, but the turnover in the East Valley is something that really kind of made me stop and go, this is interesting. This is very, very interesting, because You look at the dynamics of the league, right? You've got some changes at the top, recent top, and you have some shuffling around the valley, kind of coming in and out. And when I look at how all that has happened, I'm like, I can see a couple spots where these kids are really going to benefit from these changes. And then I look at a couple of the other ones, and I'm like, I don't know. We don't have the answers. We haven't been able to actually have these conversations yet. I'm excited to have these conversations over the next few weeks with all these coaches, kind of see the vision and kind of what they're hoping to bring. That is the top of the top for me. And outside of that, it really is looking like East Valley's wide open. Valley Mission is also, believe it or not, even though Kennedy has won it, they all believe it's wide open. You talk to Troy Cassidy at Kennedy, he knows they're not a lock. He will tell you that. Some of that is him being a humble man, which he is, right? But he will tell you it's no lock. You talk to, excuse me, everybody. You talk to Van Nuys. They're going to tell you they feel like they're still in the mix. They can still challenge, right? Sillmore believes that they belong in the mix. Hell, San Fernando just won a city title.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm guilty. I slept on San Fernando a lot last season. So the Valley Mission is wide open. As last year we talked about it. There was one game away. If it swung the other direction, we had a 3-way tie at the top. So I could see this being a similar season where you've got a bunch of teams kind of right there, and how it swings at the end of the season is going to determine who takes that league title. And then some of that shuffling around in the West Valley. So now we're like, okay, but I've got a couple sleepers there that I'm gonna save for later. So
yeah, I'm right there with you. If I had to pick, what was the thing I was most excited in terms of the storyline, it is the wide openness of everything in the San Fernando Valley. Like you said, with so much turnover in the East Valley, it is sort of a who's who and what's what in terms of like what you're going to get. We're not going to know certain things until we see these finished products on the field. Yes, there's a lot of energy around what Coach Boo is potentially going to bring at Poly. That looks exciting. Nunez leaving Arroyo and then going to joining Jackson's staff at Verdugo Hills and forming sort of a two-headed monster on each side of the ball. You expect some good things from Verdugo Hills when they weren't exactly a pushover last year. They finished 4-3 in the league, so what you're going to get from them. And then to me, you look at, and even with all that turnover right in the East Valley, you've got all this new things going on. And then look what you got over there at our leader, Bill Cohn, just shuffling right along, just being a consistent program. They've been year after year after year, and they're a team that, while we're focusing on what's happening over here at Poly and what's happening with North Hollywood, our leader was a couple of bounces away from maybe taking that East Valley from them last year. So while we're all looking at the new shiny toys, our leaders over there putting their head down, they're working, they're saying, hey, you guys can all talk about what you got that's brand new. We're going to come and we're just going to go take what ours, because that's what we do anyway, right? And like you said, and then moving over to the Valley Mission, of course, Cassidy's going to be humble, but he's earned the right for us to have expectation for them to win that title, because they've won 18 straight over Valley Mission opponents, 19 if you count the championship win over Panorama 3 years ago. They haven't lost to a Valley Mission opponent in over 3 years, right? But look at what Van Nuys has built, what Osorio's built over there. There's consistency at that program. Panorama might have their times where they're up and down offensively, but you're going to get grit from them. Sillmar is always somewhere in the mix, because that's a talent that just kind of keeps of talent flowing in. Like you said, we all slept on San Fernando, but San Fernando never sleeps on San Fernando, and they're going to be in the mix. So you're talking about a 5-horse race in the East Valley. You're talking about potentially a 5-horse race in the Valley Mission, and then let's call a spade a spade. Yes, we know what we expect from Birmingham in the West Valley, but when you look at El Camino, who they're young but they're talented, you look at Granada Hills, and you can replace the names and faces, but you know what you're going to get from them every year. Like I said, I expect Miles Cross and some of those boys over there to have a big year for Granada. Taft is building consistency in their program with Randolph now in year 3. They're expecting to take a leap. Cleveland, you know what you get from Cleveland, and now they're veteran laden and they feel like they can make some noise. And let me tell you something. I spoke to Sean Johnson at Chatsworth at the media day, and I asked him, hey, what do you expect? He looked me straight in my eye and said, oh, we're going to win. He said, we took our lumps last year. He was like, we were the nail. To this year, we're going to be the hammer, and we're going to hammer, and we're going to surprise people, right? So when you have that much belief, you have this much energy, you have this many teams that have belief going into the year. There's only 1 or 2 programs realistically that you look at that are like absolute rebuilds, because there's some work that needs to go into them. Even Arroyo, yes, they lost their coach, but they still have maintained a lot of that staff. They still got a lot of those kids that were plugging along. So the wide openness is there, and it's really, really exciting to see what we're going to get out of each one of these leagues, even for Birmingham.
One thing I do want to throw in there that I wanted to mention, Randy Luna over at Canoga Park. Took a year off. He went away, had some time with his family. I haven't had a chance to really dive into it and ask him, what drew him back. But we know there's something. That program is a prestige program. It's got a lot of history. We've talked in years past about how, that community cares about that program. And having someone who has made a big transition and had some success in difficult times coming into this program, that's one that we kind of slept on already early. I'm gonna make sure I don't sleep on them from as things go. But yeah, that's another Valley Mission one to kind of keep an eye on. They might not be a team that's banging down the door in terms of a league title, but they could surprise some people just knowing who's coaching and how he likes to play his game and the discipline he instills.
Absolutely. It's what Luna's building over there, or is going to have a chance to build over there, is going to be exciting. And like I said, you're talking about maybe a 6 team in that mix, and kind of shaking things up or rattling some cages in the Valley Mission. But it is all going to be exciting as we kick things off here in week 0. Let's talk about league champion predictions. We just kind of waxed poetic about Kennedy and their prospects. We know what Birmingham is in the West Valley. Maybe the question isn't necessarily if they're going to win, but maybe who kind of settles in that 2nd or 3rd spot in the West Valley, because usually if you finish 2nd or 3rd in the West Valley, that usually puts you in position to be a top seed in D1, because that's the sort of prestige that comes out of this conference, out of that league. And in the East Valley, like I said, we talked about, it's wide open. So holding our feet to the fire, I'll ask you, who do you have a win in the West Valley? Who do you got taking the Valley Mission? And who do you think is going to win this wide open race in the East Valley?
Part of me that wants to hem and haw and debate a bit. But honestly, until someone beats them, we've been saying this for how long now?
Long time.
Until someone beats them.
Long time.
It's Birmingham in the West Valley. That's kind of the cop-out decision. Now, if you were to ask me an upset question, I've got a couple there that might not be able to upset them. But you asked for a league champ, so I'm gonna go chalk on this one. I'm gonna stick with the favorites and do Birmingham for the West Valley.
Yeah, I'm there with you, and it's not about, I know people will roll their eyes and be like, oh, it's Birmingham. We're talking about Birmingham, but again, somebody's got to beat them. We haven't seen anybody beat them in the West Valley since I think it was 2017. Like we have to, until they, which is funny because Coach Rose said at the media day, he's like, I know the day will come that we will drop a game. He was like, but until then, expect us to be on top. So that's just how it goes. Now if you ask me if Cleveland's got a shot to beat them with all that senior leadership, I wouldn't be surprised if they gave them a game. Like I said, Granada tends to be a fly in the ointment every few years or so when it comes to dealing with Birmingham. And like I said, and the one question we have with Birmingham is having a chance to sort of watch them in their scrimmage. They clearly are looking for more balance this year to their offense than they had last year, with the ability to run the ball and also incorporating the passing game. Maybe that could provide some hiccups. But like I said, until we see someone beat them, it's going to be them in the West Valley. All right, so move on to the Valley Mission. Kennedy has had a stranglehold on that league for 3 years, but we all know there is some top talent and some good well-coached teams that sit in that league. Is this the year that someone knocks them off, or is this going to be 4 years in a row for Kennedy Cougars? Who you got?
I'm about to piss off some people that I like really, that I enjoy speaking with. And there's people that I have been around. I've spent a lot of time with some Valley Mission schools. This is gonna ruffle some feathers. I'm gonna go San Fernando.
Listen, sometimes you got to follow your gut, right? And here's what I'm gonna say. That's not a bad pick at all. I'm going to still lean Kennedy. I'm using that the same logic I used with Birmingham. When a team's won 19 straight in the league, and even the teams that, like the last couple of years, that were supposed to play them close didn't, I'm still going to lean that way. I still need to see some things out of that quarterback who's taken over for Diego Montes, because, like I said, a lot of that winning was attributed to how special that young man was. But I do think they will win, but I will say pay attention to that matchup on September 18th. Thing we love about the Valley Mission and now even the East Valley, because of how many teams are in that league, they get going with league games right away. And that September 18th they're on the road at Van Nuys, and that could tell us a lot about what is going to happen in this league. I'm going to lean Kennedy, but it is not a blowout by any means. This might be a year where Kennedy wins, but it might be a year where they win the league with a loss in league, and some of these other teams sort of beat each other up, and it's a bit of a round robin. So I'll stick with Kennedy, but it might be by the skin of their teeth. Now here's the fun question. We move on to the East Valley. There's a lot to unpack there, as we did. A lot of new coaches, a lot of new talent, a lot of moving around, a lot of things to sort of figure out. North Hollywood is the defending champs, but they've had a lot of turnover in their program, which sort of, for the Sharks, there's a little blood in the water there, right? So when all is said and done, when the dust settles, who do you have winning the East Valley League?
This is one that I've kind of gone back and forth on, and the hardest part to me is putting aside the sentimentalism and staying away from it and being neutral. But when we put that hat on, we gotta make some difficult decisions. I'm going with a senior core that is providing much needed team leadership, and as much as they'd rather be a dark horse and they'd rather be someone no one's talking about, I'm going with Verdugo Hills, their first league title in 20 years.
I mean, listen, that's not a bad shot. Add Nunes to that coaching staff, and we know what he sort of brings in terms of that toughness, that expectation of consistency, to the creativity and the things that Jackson can do offensively. Then you add in that veteran core. Yeah, I would not be surprised at all that Verdugo Hills ends that league championship drop this year. But there's a part of me that just, as much as I want to go other places, like I just mentioned them a few minutes ago, it's something about the Arleta Mustangs and what they got going on over there that they just stay here. They stay consistent. They're never too high. They're never too low. They're always in a game. You can question their offense. You can question if they've got holes in their defense. You know what they have? They have consistency in message. They have consistency in how they work. They have consistency in how they play. It's tough having to go play them at 3:30 start times on a Friday. That's a huge advantage for them, because it's just it upsets your routine to have to go play those early games. It's just something about how that program is run that keeps them in the mix. They give themselves a shot to win league every year just because of how consistent they are. Yes, I have some questions about some of the talent in certain positions on that team, but I'm done with doubting them. Like I said, they almost stole that league from North Hollywood last year, and they're going to be in position to do the same thing this year. So I'm going to lean. It's going to be wide open. Whoever wins this league, they're going to win it with a loss or two, because I do think some of these teams at the top are going to beat each other up a little bit. But I'm going to lean our leader. They'll win it with some tiebreakers, but I'll go with the Mustangs as my pick for East Valley League champions. So before we wrap it up, let's talk about dark horse teams, right? Because of the wide open nature of what's going on with our three leagues in the Valley, there are some teams that, like you had talked about with Diego Luna over at Canoga Park. Like I said, a team we haven't mentioned too much in Arroyo because I think we assumed maybe they would take a step backwards with the change at the head coach position, but it's still a lot of the same kids there that have been grinding blood, sweat, and tears. They still got senior leadership, right? So there are some teams that could shake up the apple cart. Give me one or two teams that you think could be dark horses and have better than expected seasons this year in the Valley.
Well, they might not actually be dark horses in this, but I'm going to name two teams. Actually, I'm going to name three. I'll name one from each league that we have not talked about. But one of them I did name drop. So I'll start with the one I name dropped already. That'll be Canoga. They're my dark horse out of the Valley Mission. And like I said, they've got a coach who demands accountability, teaches accountability, and is a master motivator. He's really good at molding these young men, right? So that's there. And I'll jump over to West Valley, a team I don't believe we've actually mentioned more than just in passing, just a little bit. I'm gonna go Taft. I'm gonna say Taft. I really, really like what Randolph has been doing over there. I think they're probably a team that is overlooked a little bit in terms of someone who can make noise in that league, and maybe even threaten Birmingham. So they're my dark horse out there. And in the East Valley, a team, honestly, I don't think we've mentioned in the last little bit we talked, other than just kind of part of the shuffle, is going to be Poly. They've got kids transferring in. There's going to be sit-out period kids. They're not going to be able to play. So there's going to be some time while they try to figure things out and get the chemistry under a brand new coach. But that's a dark horse right there. They can, honestly, the way I've been hearing things, they're either a favorite or a dark horse. And in this sense, because we haven't really talked about them, they kind of flew under what we were saying. They'll be my pick there.
Yeah, I'll piggyback over with Polly, because that's definitely somebody I look at as a dark horse. Pretty much for the same reasons you said. They'll have some kids that'll sort of kind of emerge as you get halfway through the season. That'll really sort of shake up things that might be happening in the East Valley. And like I said, there's just an energy around that program now with Boo Williams sort of taking over. There's a feeling of like, hey, we're ready to sort of step in and become that top team in this league. You go around that campus, there's a whole new energy and a whole different vibe to Poly now. They basically rebuilt that school from the ground up. It's a new school. There's a new energy. It feels like a different time. It feels like this might be the time where they can sort of break through and become maybe a flag bearer, standard bearer school in the East Valley, sort of going forward. And this could be a year where that starts. Another team that we haven't mentioned too much in that Valley Mission mix is Silmar. Silmar is always a team that, because they've always got talent. They've always, Evander Williams has been there for a while now. So there's sort of consistency that's being built into that program. They schedule tough in their non-league, and then they're a pain in the butt to deal with when you get in league. No one really ever blows Silmar out. They're always sticking around. They're always in the game because they've got the kind of talent and the coaching that keeps them there. So they could be a team that, while we're not paying attention to them, they could kind of maybe sneak up and be that second team or that challenger to Van Nuys and Kennedy and San Fernando in the West Valley. And just to kind of double back again on Chatsworth, they had a tough season last year, right? They lost a lot of games. They lost a lot of games in the West Valley, but this team got into the D2 playoff and they blew out I can't remember who they played, but I do remember their first round opponent. They blew them out. So it tells you that even when a school like Chatsworth is struggling, if you don't take them serious, they will kick your behind, because these kids there's no quit in that program. That was something they kind of talked about heavily, all those kids, in that belief at the media day of like, yeah, we're not going to be the hammer this year. We're going to be the ones hammering people. So they could be somebody who you look up and be like, oh man, like I didn't think they were going to win that game, and then they kind of sort of take off from there. And then last but not least, I'll just mention Arroyo. Like I said, everybody knows. Everybody, if you listen to this podcast for the last few years, I'm always banging on a horn. I'm banging on the drum for this school. I believe in the people in that community, the kids that play at that school. And even though they lost their coach, the coaches who've taken over, they've kept that consistency of message, and I expect them to be a pain in the butt to deal with this year as well. So we're going to wrap up that preview there. You know what, guys? We always talk about how much we love doing this. We talk about how much we're going to make sure that we keep bringing this stuff to you. And that's not going to be any different here as we get into the 2026 season. There's a lot of things coming down the pipe from VST, and we're going to bring it all to you. We're going to cover these teams all year long, and we're going to bring you coverage of every sport all year long. So keep it locked right here on our YouTube. Please leave a like and subscribe. We got more things coming. And make sure you go to valleysportstelegram.com. We have so many goodies there that you're going to want to check out as we get into this kickoff week for week 0 for football. And we've got a lot of other things coming down the pipe. So we'll end this here. For myself, Kenny Hodges, for Arshavir Sarian, we'll see you guys out in the field. We'll see you guys out in the stadiums. Peace.